Hi, in this lesson we are going to talk about the nested loops. A loop that can be nested within another loop is known as the nested loop. Nested loops are necessary when an iterative process itself must be repeated. So here we can see the nested loop, how it works. So one for loop, and we are nesting another for loop inside the first for loop. The first for loop corresponds to outer loop. The second for loop corresponds to the inner loop. Okay, the second for loop becomes the body of the outer loop, and here you can see the print statement which is inside the second for loop. So this print statement becomes the body of the inner for loop. The second for loop itself becomes the body of the first for loop, that means the outer loop, and the print statement which is inside the second for loop becomes the body of the inner for loop. So let us see how this nested loop works in Python. So here we can see how we have implemented the nested loop to get a matrix of size 10 cross 10. So we know in mathematics we represent the matrix in the form of rows and columns. So these corresponds to rows and these corresponds to columns. First for loop corresponds to rows and the second for loop corresponds to the columns. So how it works? When we use the first for loop, it will create the rows, and when we use the second for loop, it will create a column. So for the column we are using the product as the element of the column. Okay, so here we can only see the program code structure, but if we go to the practical work we will understand how it works. So let us move on to the practical work. So here is the program. So instead of I and j, we are replacing I and j by row and columns. Okay, so row and column. So for row in range 1 to size plus 1, where size is the number entered by the user, means the matrix size number entered by the user. So matrix is also called as table. So for row in range 1 to size plus 1, and inside the first for loop we are nesting another for loop. For column in range 1 to size plus 1, print the row number and then the column number separated by no space, and print each element side by side. Okay, so what I am going to do here is I am not doing the product multiplication, means the product operation initially, just I am creating the matrix format. So we know matrix consists of row number as well as the column number in matrix or in table generally. So this will print the row number and the column number. It will just create the matrix with the row number and column number, means the position of each element in a matrix. So let us see how it works. See here, this print statement create the elements of the matrix in the form of position, and the second print statement, which is the body of the first for loop. Look at here, the indentation. This second for loop is the body of the first for loop, and this print statement is also the body of the first for loop. This first print statement is required to print or to insert a new line once the complete column has been created with the inner for loop. So look at here, column. Once the complete column has been created, we need to move to the next column. That's why we are using print statement to move to the next row or next line inside the first for loop. So let us select this cell and run using the shortcut Control plus Enter. Let us enter the size of the matrix as 10 as per our explanation. You can enter any other number. Let me enter 10 and see how the matrix formation has been created. So look at here, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3 up to column 10. So you can see like this. Let us remove this. Yes, since there is no space, that's why it is showing the elements of the 9th column and 10th column in next line. So this is how we represent the matrix, right? So let us enter 5 to see how actually it displays. Let us run once again, Control plus Enter, and this time enter 5 to see the exact matrix format. Yes, please look at here, row number 1, column number 1, row number 1, column number 2, because this is the first row, right? Yes, first row and 5 elements inside the first row. So individual elements in each row corresponds to the column. Okay, row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, row 1, column 4, row 1, column 5, and row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5. Look at the row number. Okay, row 3, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, row 4 up to column 5, row 5 up to column 5. Look at here, column 5, row 5, column 5. This is how we represent the matrix in mathematics. Yes or no? So the same format using here. So now the logic here is, instead of just printing the row position, row 1, column 1, row 2, row 1, column 2, and similarly for other rows, what I am doing is, we are using the product instead of the position of each element of the table or matrix. So we are replacing this complete step. Look at here, inside the print statement of the second for loop with the product. So what is meant by product? Product is nothing but multiplication of or the product of row element and the column element. So when we multiply row element and the column element, we will get the product of each matrix element. So here, look at here, row 1, column 1. If we multiply these two elements, we will get the product. So for each row element means for each row element, so in order to represent each row element, we are just using the word row. Okay, in order to refer each column element, we are just using the word column. Are you getting what I am going to tell you? Okay, fine. For row in range 1 to size of the matrix, and for each column in the range 1 to size of the matrix, do the product operation with each row element and column element. So when we do the product operation, it becomes the element of the matrix. Okay, so here is the product, and here I can see the end. We have not modified this end because we need to insert each element side by side as per the rows and columns structure. Okay, that's why we are using end, and here I am using two spaces instead of one space. 1, yes, 2, 3. Okay, yes. And once again, this print statement, once the first row product has been completed, the cursor has to move to the second row. That's why we are using the print statement inside the first for loop. Look at the indentation. So here also it is just the mirror of this program, is just the mirror of this program, but only the modification is we are replacing this row position with the product element using the product variable. Okay, let us run this code. Let's enter the size of the matrix as 5. Yes, look at here, size 1 at row and column 1. 1 into 1 is nothing but 1, and this, since it is row 1 and column 1, 1 into 2 is nothing but 2, and row 1 column is 3, 1 into 3 is nothing but 3, 1 into 4, 4, 1 into 5, 5. Okay, have we got? Okay, next second row. Since it is second row and first column, second row means 2 into column, first column means 1, so 2 into 1, 1, and second row into second column, 2 into 2 is nothing but 4, 2 into third column 6, and 2 into fourth column, and 2 into fifth column. Similarly, third row into first column, third row into second column, third row into third column, third row into fourth column, 3 4s are 12, and similarly fifth row and fifth column. So this is how we can create the table or matrix in Python using the nested loops. Let us see one more example to print the permutation of the word and get the possible ordering of a sequence for a particular word. So here we are using the word ABC in capital letters, and we are trying to get the permutation of the letters in word. Okay, so all the possible permutations. So in order to do that, we know that when we want to do the permutation, we should first consider the word as it is, and in the second step we need to replace the first word with the second word, and there should not be any duplicate letters. Means once the first element is selected, next the first element should not repeat with the second element. So first element and then second, the second varies from A to C once again, and second should not be equal to first. And in the third step we are selecting the third element and it varies from A to C, but third element should not be equal to first and second. So third element should not be equal to first and it should not be equal to second. That's why we are using AND operator, logical compound boolean expression. That is, third should not be equal to first and third is not equal to second. Then print first plus second plus third. So look at here, we are nesting two for loops inside the main for loop. So this is the second for loop and this is the third for loop. So totally we have three for loops for three words. Okay, because we need to check the first letter should not be equal to the second and third, and with the second letter should not be equal to the first letter and the last letter. So that is how the permutation happens, right? Permutation means all the possible combination of the sequence ordering of the letters of a particular word. So let us run this code and see what happens. So look at here, initially ABC, of course first element in ABC, that is A, and second element, that is B, and we know that B is not equal to A, correct, and third element C, and C is not equal to A and B. So hence the condition is true, it will print the first word as ABC. And in the second time, first element A, yes, in ABC, and second for loops, second in ABC, that is B, and look at here, B should not be equal to first. Yes, this condition is true. Yes, B is not equal to A. And third, in the third for loop we are selecting the word letter C, and in the if statement third is not equal to first and third is not equal to second. So third here means C. Okay, so C should not be equal to first and C should not be equal to second, hence it prints A, the first element, and in the second it selects C, and in the third it selects B. Next it looks for the second sequence. So as A has been compared with B and C, A cannot be compared with the A itself. So for A we got two sequence of the ordering of the word, and for the second letter B cannot be compared with itself, right? So first element becomes A, second element becomes B, and third element becomes C. And the control flow always repeat the process inside the innermost loop first. Once the operation of the innermost loop happens, then it will jump to the second innermost loop and it will move to the third innermost loop and it will move to the main loop. So here, if you look at the third for loop, that is for third in ABC. So first observe here for this word BAC. First we are selecting A. Next for second B. So A and B is not equal to B. Yes, right. For third C in ABC. Look at this for loop, the third for loop. Third should not be equal to first. So first element is nothing but what? A. Third element is nothing but what? C. C should not be equal to A, and C should not be equal to the second element B. Hence it prints first, second and third. The first element chosen is nothing but B for the second iteration, and the second element becomes A, and the third element becomes C. So this is how it prints the combination of the order of the word ABC.